Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's time for Chattanooga Business Radio. Now, here are your Business Radio X hosts.
And welcome to Chattanooga Business Radio. Brian Joyce, that is my name, and I am the host of the show. We are broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center in downtown Chattanooga. And my guest on today's show is a gentleman by the name of Marcel Schwantes. And Marcel is an executive coach. He's a leadership trainer. He's an entrepreneur. He is an LA Dodgers fan. He's also a husband and a father. And he's the founder of Leadership from the Core, which is the only servant leadership development boutique in Chattanooga that's dedicated to growing leaders and healthy work cultures. Marcel, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So let's talk about Leadership from the Core in a nutshell. What is your organization and what do you do?
Well, you said it well. Leadership from the Core's main existence is to come in and assess organizational culture. And we do that through assessments. And then we make a case for transforming your workplace by doing leadership development. And then the coaching piece kicks in. And then we help to transform cultures.
We're going to get into a more specific conversation here about servant leadership, but when you look at leadership in general, if you could, what are some of the qualities of a good leader? What makes a good leader?
I think first and foremost, you have to have influence. And what we're finding in today's relationship economy is that those leaders that actually can influence others through relationships, through getting to know their people well, those are the ones that are really going to, I think, do well in this, like I said, this relationship economy. We're in this social era right now of doing business, so that's really important.
So a relationship economy, I would assume then communication. This would be key.
Communication is very key. I think that's one of it's the backbone of building strong and healthy relationships in the workplace.
Let's talk about servant leadership. Tell our listeners a little bit about what servant leadership is and what it's not, and what are some of the common misconceptions about it.
Well, I know it's funny. I get this a lot. Servant leadership is not by any stretch a new thing, a new philosophy. In fact, it's been around for centuries. It just so happened that a guy by the name of Robert Greenleaf took the term servant leadership and applied it to the modern workplace, modern corporate, in a corporate setting. And after he researched for many, many years the applications and the benefits of a servant leader to get the best out of their people, to get people to perform at the highest level. And so in 1970, Robert Greenleaf wrote his famous essay, "The Servant as a Leader," and then from that point on, other people began to take notice that, hey, you know what, this is a philosophy that a company could aspire to become to lead others. And what the research is saying is that servant-led companies actually translate to better performance overall, and it impacts your bottom line.
So just to sort of clarify this, to drill down on this, so servant leadership more or less is the idea, the notion that not only is the leader of a business the leader of his employees, but he's also a servant to them. He should have that kind of a relationship, he or she.
That's right. And even as your listeners probably listen to that, they're going, well, you know what, that sounds a little bit too, paradoxical, and that's true.
Mm-hmm.
How can you lead and serve at the same time? Well, Jim Collins did his famous research in his book, Good to Great, and he calls the best leaders are the ones that have fierce resolve, but guess what? The other side of the coin is they have humility, right?
Right.
There's the paradoxical, and same with servant leaders. You lead by serving first. So it's a real upside-down pyramid where you're supporting the people above you by lifting them up and giving them opportunities to learn and develop themselves so they can succeed.
And so going back through the history of this, and I think you were just talking about this is a movement that happened within the past couple of decades, I think. But let's just sort of go back through the history of this, because certainly through the Industrial Revolution and up until the early 20th century, you think of the big boss man. The boss man is the very rich and distant and out-of-touch man who sits in the glass office, overlooking the floor, and nobody communicates with him. And so when was it that business leaders and academics started to come together and say to themselves, there might be a better way of doing this?
I think Gallup organization has probably a lot to do with helping us see things differently, because they're doing all of the research that keeps saying that America's workers have not been engaged for the last 15 years. And if you look at the stats, only 30% of U.S. workers are actually engaged.
Right.
The needle has not moved. And so Gallup is saying that the best managers are the ones that are constantly taking the pulse of the employees and asking, what do you need? And so that kind of became a catalyst for other businesses, leaders, and organizations across industries to finally tap into, hey, you know what? I think this whole command and control style of leading, this whole top-down approach, I think that's gone by the wayside. We need to find out a different approach, especially with all of these millennials coming in.
Sure.
This is a different breed of animal.
Absolutely.
And they need to, they respond to a different type of leadership. And I think that's the servant leaders are great for if you want to bring in millennials into your workforce to infuse into the workplace. I think there's a happy marriage.
So then how do you respond to, say, the old school types who they know that the millennials are coming up, but they look at them with a little bit of distrust and say these younger workers, these millennials, they're spoiled, they're brats, they expect everybody to do everything for them. But at the same time, you're saying that to some degree, the leader of any organization, you should be aware of that. You should just be able to roll with people's personality and their character traits and just know that we're living in a different time now.
Yeah, sometimes it's going against the grain. It's very counterintuitive for a lot of people in leadership roles to, aspire to do that. For those people, I'm not saying that it doesn't work for them. It just takes a little bit of stretching and courage to be able to, to shift your thinking and your behaviors like that. I think that it would work best for, say, a startup organization that already has people that believe in those principles to say, hey, no, we want our culture to become a servant-led culture, because you have to have champions at the top that believe in these principles in the first place.
And as you were just sort of hinting at there, excuse me, there have been numerous studies and surveys that indicate that happier employees are better employees. And I think that's why over the past couple of decades, you have seen, you have seen a lot of organizations moving towards, whether it be, ping pong tables in the office or nap pods or more family leave time, more vacation time, allowing people to work from home if they're able to. This all sort of speaks to what you're getting at here, where if you have happy employees, they're probably likely to be productive employees.
Yeah. I think ping pong tables and free coffee only go as far as it can.
Right.
Millennials, and this is not just millennials, but I think any worker across the board, you have to appeal to them on an emotional level, Brian. So it's really giving them purpose and meaning. They want to get up in the morning,
right,
to have that and come in and have that kind of purpose that appeals to them from the neck up. And that's how you're going to engage those people at the highest level.
You're listening to Chattanooga Business Radio. Brian Joyce, that is my name, and we're broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center in downtown Chattanooga. And my guest here is Marcel Schwantes, and Marcel is the managing principal of Leadership from the Core, which is based right here in Chattanooga. Now, Marcel, some of your articles and presentations refer to the fact that everybody, you believe, is capable of the core activities of servant leadership. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? What are some of the behaviors that set servant leaders apart from others?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier the fact that great servant leaders and even level 5 leaders in Jim Collins' study require a great amount of humility, right? And I say that because right off the bat, you're eliminating a lot of people who say, it's just not me. It's counterintuitive to be able to lead by being humble. It's not a household business term, right? But that's one of the things that will knock off a lot of people. You have to have the humility mindset to be able to serve others well. And the misconception is that, well, that means I'm a doormat. No. In fact, when you're a humble, you have great listening skills because you're trying to gather the perspectives of various people from across the board, age groups, genders, etc., because you're trying to build community, and that's one of the strengths of the servant leader is they have that skill of they can bring people together and get various opinions and perspectives and ideas for cross-pollination, really. Another few other behaviors is that they share leadership. What that means is that they let others own the decision-making process. So it's not just about them. they're willing to give away authority or push authority down.
Yeah.
And this is a great engagement tactic to allow for other people to take the helm, and learn how to lead as well. Another is that they display authenticity. Basically, what that means is, they show up with honesty at all times. They speak truth. They are not go back to listening skills again. They are great listeners. They listen intuitively to understand how to meet the needs of the other side of the table. So a couple of others that are really integral for a servant leader is that they provide leadership. And now this is the one that, it's the hard skill side of servant leadership. You have the soft skill side, but you also need the hard skill side. This is about meeting goals, and it's about driving results.
Right.
And so sort of the meat in the meat and potatoes conversation, that's the meat of the servant leader, right? They still need to they aspire to create results and have profitable companies. So you have to have that there as well.
Well, it's interesting to me, again, these concepts you're talking about of communication and honesty, and I do not have nearly the experience and the expertise on this that you do, but I've worked in a lot of different industries over the course of my life. And I have always said this. I have said this my entire adult working life, that the one quality that I look for in a good boss, in a good leader, is communication. And bear in mind, when you talk about, you were saying this does not necessarily mean you need to be a doormat that your employees will just walk right over. I have worked for some really tough, some might say mean people. But as long as they communicate the expectations very clearly and they're very open and honest about it, I can work for people like that all day long because I know what's expected of me. And so if I'm not fulfilling my duties the way they expected, at least there's no miscommunication there. And
right.
So that's sort of a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, in a lot of our exit interviews and assessments, that floats to the top a lot. Is just my managers and my leadership team, they don't communicate expectations clearly. We don't. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
Right. Right.
We've heard of all that. So that speaks to what you're saying. And the servant leader is very affirming in moving the mission forward by letting everyone know what's going on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. The communication is a really strong skill of the servant leader.
Yeah. Once again, you're listening to Chattanooga Business Radio. We're broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center in downtown Chattanooga. My name is Brian Joyce, and my guest here is Marcel Schwantes. Marcel is the managing principal of an organization right here in Chattanooga, which is called Leadership from the Core, and that's an organization that provides leadership training. Marcel, the principles of servant leadership, again, getting back to the millennials, you were pointing out that these principles of what you call servant leadership, they really do resonate with millennials. Now, what is appealing, and how might this willingness to adopt servant leadership principles help local companies to attract more millennials?
Servant leaders are prolific at coaching and mentoring, and that is, according to the research, millennials are seeking leaders that will coach and mentor them in the workplace, because millennials, especially the millennials that are the type of millennials that want to move up in their companies and they want to succeed, they are looking for that environment, the experiential environment where leaders will allow them to stretch themselves and to have different opportunities to learn and grow. So that's very key for millennials. Millennials are also very social creatures, and so they are looking for a place to, they seek leaders that almost lead by storytelling, as the saying goes with Simon Sinek's book, and millennials are very relationship oriented as well. So the collaboration piece is key in attracting millennials, is also retaining millennials. They love an atmosphere where they collaborate with a diversity of ideas, and the servant leader will bring all that together. And I mentioned building community. This is very key for collaboration. You want to foster that environment where everybody is chipping in and everybody's opinions are being heard and ideas are flowing.
When you do meet with business leaders, how do you convince these people? How do you make the case to, whether it be executives, HR people, etc.? How do you convince them that servant leadership is the way to go? And specifically, how do you convince them that this will be good for your bottom line? Because at the end of the day, that's what any good businessman is concerned about. And sort of going back to the beginning of our conversation, especially when you're dealing with maybe some women and men who come from the old school, and this is not their way of doing things. How do you convince them that this is the way to go, and this will be good for your bottom line?
Yeah, I think that there are so many, Brian, so many business cases for it. One that comes to mind right away is the story of the Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. They were literally in the tank back in 2007, and they brought in the CEO, Cheryl Batchelder, and she turned around that whole organization by putting the spotlight back on the people that they serve. Well, in a restaurant chain, who are the people that they serve? Well, the restaurant franchisees are the ones that they put the spotlight on, and so their mode of operation became a servant leadership culture by giving the franchise owners all the opportunity they needed to succeed, in their chains. Through that model, they turned around the company. Now it's one of the most profitable restaurant chains around. And Cheryl Batchelder attributes the turnaround to servant leadership, and that's a great case study. And she even wrote a book about it called Dare to Serve, if you want to look it up on Amazon. Dare to Serve by Cheryl Batchelder. But I can't think of a bigger case for how to translate that to the bottom line. Another study that came out a few years ago came out in a book called The 7 Pillars of Servant Leadership by James Sipe and Don Frick. They studied through 10 years. They did a study on servant-led companies, and what they found is that they actually outperformed both the S&P 500 companies financial performance, but they also outperformed Jim Collins' Good to Great companies in their research studies. And some of those companies in their study were Southwest Airlines, Men's Warehouse, and ServiceMasters. And so that's another example of, if I'm having a conversation with a CEO, I'll bring out the studies and say, well, it worked for these companies, and these are Fortune 500 companies. It could work for you as well.
Talking here once again with Marcel Schwantes, and Marcel is the managing principal of Leadership from the Core. That's an organization right here in Chattanooga that provides leadership training, specifically servant leadership. Now, Marcel, just to get back into your history and your background, how did you become interested in this conversation of servant leadership? What is your mission? What is your purpose for doing this? And what is the mission of your company?
I think after about 20 years of working not only for executives, but also having a front row seat in executive teams in previous companies, I realized that something was missing. And then I ran into an executive who I reported to that engaged me in a way that I had never experienced before. You'll actually hear the story in my 2.5-minute company video on my website. And his name was Bruce. And Bruce was unlike any other leader that I reported to. He was always listening to me. He was always having meetings, communicating well. He just equipped me to succeed. His best interest was for me to have the tools I needed, the resources I needed, always checking in with me constantly. And I didn't have a label for what kind of leader he was at that time.
Right.
And then as I progressed through my career, et cetera, I realized Bruce was a servant leader because his behaviors were exactly what the research is saying. These are the leaders that work well.
And isn't it always amazing, no matter how many years you've been in this, no matter how many decades, I find this to be true about myself. You always remember those one or two bosses who have that place in your heart, and for me, I remember when I was in college, just my part-time summer job. The manager that I had working this part-time summer job when I was a sophomore, junior in college, to this day, I still consider Jim to be one of the top 1 or 2 managers I ever had. Here we are 20 years later. I still remember the qualities that he brought to the table and why that made him a very good leader.
If we can replicate both your boss and my boss and that back in those days, we would have a lot lower turnover in companies. Yeah. We would solve the issue of low employee engagement across the country that Gallup has been saying, because these are the reasons that servant leaders exist. Obviously, is to make sure that your company succeeds. You're not forsaking the bottom line, but you're putting the focus on developing your people and mentoring your people and making sure they succeed, because that translates to better customer service and et cetera.
But also to go back to the point of the bottom line here, you talk about turnover. Unhappy employees, you're likely to have a lot more turnover within the company. And of course, turnover means more money spent. It's more money spent training up new employees, more time wasted training up new employees. If you have happy employees who know what they're doing and are confident in their company's leadership, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, in the Gallup study that they did with employee turnover across the board, they attribute about 80% of all of the reasons that people quit goes right back to the direct manager.
Yeah, which just means more money spent on training.
Yeah.
You're listening to Chattanooga Business Radio. We're broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center, downtown Chattanooga, and my guest here is Marcel Schwantes. Marcel, once again, is the managing principal of Leadership from the Core. That's an organization right here in Chattanooga that provides leadership training. Marcel, last question here. Let's also get back into what's going on here on the ground in Chattanooga. Your company, Leadership from the Core. Recently, you were in the spotlight as one of only 12 startup companies in Chattanooga that got to participate in CoLab's accelerator program. You pitched in front of investors and the media over at the new Innovation District. Tell us about your need for investors and what's next for Leadership from the Core.
Yeah, we realized that in order to scale, we have to leverage e-learning. And in the research out there is saying that last year, at least, 1 out of 5 working professionals actually utilized an e-learning platform, an LMS-type platform. And we're not talking academia. We're actually talking, people in corporate America. And so we want to leverage the technology of a LMS or an e-learning platform to be able to take our secret sauce, if you will, and all of our methodology and put it into an e-learning format to be able to now take our training to anybody at the click of a mouse and be able to access it on any tablet device, wireless device, and so we are in the process of, we've already identified providers for our platform. We are looking for funding from an investor group that can come in and partner with us to get us to the next stage. We have a lot of content that we need to develop, and we have a lot of marketing to get that content out for people to know, how to find it. So that's our need for angel investors, at least for the first phase of funding, is what we're looking for.
Once again, folks, you've been listening to Chattanooga Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center, and Marcel Schwantes, managing principal of Leadership from the Core. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great conversation talking to you. Now, any potential clients who are listening to this show right now who might want to reach out to you and learn more about what you're doing at Leadership from the Core, certainly learn a lot more about servant leadership. I know you have a website, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter. Go ahead, give any information out that you would like to give.
Yeah, I think the best place to find me would go to be on the website, leadershipfromthecore.com, and then you we'll get you in the right place there. But feel free to touch base with me on LinkedIn as well, Marcel Schwantes, and on Twitter at Marcel Schwantes.
There we go. Marcel, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.
Once again, folks, Chattanooga Business Radio broadcasting live from the Regis Office Center, and you can check out Marcel Schwantes at www.leadershipfromthecore.com. My name is Brian Joyce, and I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.